Now, isn't that wonderful? It's a wonderful story, isn't it? It's something that we need to look at in the future, as a theme, as such, looking at women in business. But we're talking about local and a global level. Today, women's leadership and political participation are still restricted. Women are underrepresented as voters, as well as in leading positions, whether in elected office, the civil service, the private sector, or academia, it seems. Now, this occurs despite their proven abilities as leaders and agents of change, and their right to participate equally in democratic governance. Now, for more on this topic, we are joined by Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka, who is the postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria. Doctor, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, Elvis. Thank you.
That was a lovely story we just saw about a woman in business, in the taxi business, very patriarchal society. What do you make of that?
Well, the transportation sector is traditionally patriarchal, men governed, and I think stats come to mind. It's either between 10 to 13% of the transport sector women participate economically.
Now, that's fantastic on a local level, but let's look at female heads of state across the globe. Now, they're increasing. I mean, we've seen Angela Merkel, we've seen the British PM, we've seen now, at the precipice of becoming the President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, with Dilma Rousseff, to name a few. What do you make of all of that?
It's really interesting, and I have to say that a lot of this really started way back in 1995 at the Beijing conference. It was the fourth conference on UN Women, and that was when there were public declarations made in terms of consciously increasing the representation of women within the political space. So the number that was set there was 30%, and as in terms of decision-making capability, and that was cited as a magic target, and it's purely from a quota point of view, and some people think that if they achieve the target, that's the cap, but it was about having a minimum. And between a 20-year period, so going through from 1995 through to 2015, globally across the world in terms of the Interparliamentary Union, which measures 174 different countries, it's doubled from 11% through to 22%. There are obviously countries which perform better than others. So two which exceed the 50% mark are Rwanda and Bolivia. And also the composition within that top 10 structure over the 20-year period has changed. So in the early days of 1995, it was predominantly the Nordic countries accounting there. And now when we look into 2015, we see a lot of our African countries coming through. So as I mentioned, Rwanda, there's also Senegal and South Africa. So we're all ranked within the top 10. And in that top 10, it ranges from 64% down through to 41%.
In
so
that top 10, how do we rank in terms of that performance?
Oh, we're number 8, so we're joint place with Mexico, 41%.
That sounds absolutely fantastic, woman representation on a political level. Are we then close to that that magical mark of perhaps one day getting a female president?
Well, we'd love to see that. And one of the things that come into contention on the political side is it's not only about having the political will, you need to have the political support. Yes. You also need the party composition. And one of the, I suppose, fundamental in the constitution of the ANC is very stringently 40-40. So if you look back on our history, democratic history, in early days, we had less than 2.7% pre-1994. Then it went to 27%, 30%, 33%, 45%, and dipped down to 41% in the last national election, purely because of the party differentiators.
How has women in influential positions affected change for women globally and even in our country, you think?
Dramatically from a role modeling point of view. See, when you see people in those positions, it means that is representative of you and a possibility. And I recall a conversation I had with the Norwegian ambassador, and she said, relaying a story to me where a young boy was growing up in Norway, and at the time they had a female prime minister. And the mum said to him, "You can be whatever you want to be." And he said, "Does that mean prime minister as well?" And she said, "Yes, boys can be prime ministers too." So it was a wonderful story, but in more practical terms, it's about being able to provide the legislative support, being able to implement policies, having that enabling component. And that's really important when we go not just on the government level, but down in terms of local leadership and structures. So whether women are participating as mayors, on councils, and providing access to public services for other women.
What are the sort of benefits that a female leader bring to an organization, you think?
Well, there are different traits and different benefits. So sometimes people look at personal traits, whether that is charisma and your influence. Others are on a practical level, so having people follow. But I think just dwell in terms of the benefits and the outcomes that it's giving through to women. By having that representation, it's really having strong women's issues addressed. So a couple of stories, for instance, in India, they had several water projects. And in councils which were predominantly women, so 62% women versus, but actually 62% of these projects were able to deliver water to these services, to the municipalities. In Norway, again, and as an example, they had an increase in terms of childcare when you saw higher numbers of women in the local government space. So it's about being able to address women's issues that not only affect the people who are serving in these environments, but also the ordinary women around them, to uplift their lives for development.
What needs to happen in order for women to function, to be that change agents that we require in society, to advance the roles of women, not just in the household, but politically and overall?
I would say it starts on two levels. One, children as they're growing up, about grooming them, having enabling environments, having supportive families, and that's not just within the matriarchs in the family, but also supportive fathers. Provision of education and quality education. It's not just here's your primary education and off you go. It's having that quality. Skills development, exposure to different networks, extracurricular activity, and being able to uphold young girls' rights. So those would be key enablers to help them move forwards. On a high level, it's about implementation of quotas, so those provide the opportunity, and it's about being able to sustain those elements and continue to develop and nurture women into the future space.
Are we as a society, or do you think as a society, that we're doing enough to uplift women in our society?
I think we're not doing enough yet. We are certainly doing work at the moment, but until we get to that magical number of 50-50, we're not quite there yet. And when you consider that women in South Africa represent 52% of our population, it would be ideal to see a representative figure in those environments.
Doctor, as usual, thank you so much. I think we've still got a lot more time to talk about this, but unfortunately we've run out of time, so we'll do that some other time. Thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka, who is the postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria, joining us in studio, talking about women in society and how they impact on you and me. Now,